Hey everyone, thanks very much for coming along and happy Halloween. Hope you're having a great one today. You might have noticed earlier in the channel that I posted a kind of thriller Halloween kind of track, and it wasn't really for anything. It was more just as a kind of study, just to kind of practice my horror chops. And I'm now going to do a score breakdown video of my process and kind of taking you back to the very opening stages of writing that piece into Sibelius and then into Logic. So this is going to be quite a geeky kind of deep dive into my process. So the thing that you're seeing here just now is where the piece started in these extremely messy kind of scribbles. I suppose this kind of comes from my training, where I look at harmony first of all as being kind of the most important thing. It's what I really want to sort of work out before I start any piece. Of course, lots of approaches work. This is just the way that it kind of works for me, is that I really like to know what the sort of harmonic world of a piece is, and it really sort of helps me out. So these chords on the left here is where what I sort of started with. So we end up with this first chord, and then I thought to kind of go against that, the dominant diminished scale would go quite nicely. So we kind of got that C minor 9 playing against that sort of idea. So the first two chords kind of pose a question, which is quite nice, a mysterious sort of question. So the kind of theme, I mean, it has been used before, I think that's fair to say, of those first two chords. So I was just kind of improvising and working out where these two chords might go. The first kind of 5 chords that you get here, there's no real kind of formal plan behind them. I'm more just using my ear to kind of tell me where I think the harmony should be going. And you notice that I put wee scribbles to myself. So actually this chord is chord 1, and then this chord is the second chord. And then I go back to chord 1 because I just felt it needed to be grounded in C minor a little bit longer. So back to chord 1, and then onto chord 4, which is this one here. So the first few bars of the pieces. It's a very nice bit of distance. Then we go back to C minor, but I'm developing that top melody a little bit. Against the C minor chord, and then we arrive at this final chord here, which again I just sort of worked out. So this quaver idea, which keeps coming back, is just gradually sort of expanding in the range. It sort of starts in quite a limited range of just a minor third, and then it expands into a much wider range. Still pretty simple. But you'll notice that by the end of this bar, it now takes up a whole octave between this B and this B down below it. So that's kind of how I'm developing that idea. I'm expanding the range that it exists in. So now moving over to these scribbles over here, I'm doing what's called chord rotations. Now this is a really kind of geeky, technical sort of thing, which I learned at college, and I've used it in my work. Since then, I find it an extremely useful way of generating harmony, which for me is a really important thing as a composer. And the basic technique is that you work out what the intervals are, and you take the bottom interval and move it to the top. I'm not going to get into it too much here. If you want me to do a longer video on chord rotations, I will. But you'll see that I took this chord here and moved it up here. So I worked out the intervals. So it's 4, 4, 7, 7, 1 is what that works out as. And then I'm able to manipulate the chord a little bit and create new chords off the back of this number that I get. But what I'm doing here is I'm transposing it by a minor third. So we're always getting this sort of movement through the chords. So it always feels like the chords are sort of moving forward. So the sequence at the top starts there and moves to the next one. So that's this chord here, and then we move to this one here, which is this. And And then the last one here is this one, which I particularly liked. I thought that was the kind of most interesting one out of these chords. And I changed a few notes because I tried to avoid octaves for various reasons. So then I took this chord and I treated it in the same way. Because it had changed ever so slightly, I thought this is an important chord which I'm going to use. So here we did the same thing and transposed it all up by a third each time. A minor third each time, I should say. So then we create these chords. So you can hear that those chords very much have the same atmosphere, the same flavor, the same sort of mood. And this is exactly why I use chord rotations, because it's a really interesting way, a really useful way of generating harmony, which kind of speaks the same language without having to think too much. And I really like the rigor of sort of working out the sort of maths behind harmony. I think that's a really useful thing to do. So you'll see that I took all these chords here as well, which actually never made it into the piece at all. And then I've got another scribble of stuff down here. So this is another chord rotation of this opening here, which I ended up not really liking too much because it had a lot of octaves and it actually sounded quite bare. I did that, I think. Yeah, that one didn't work. So I took this and then I moved it into Sibelius. So the next part of my process is I always write and orchestrate at Sibelius. I very rarely go straight to the DAW. Just as part of my training. It's probably a very inefficient way of working, but Sibelius is the next place where I took this sketch to. I'm here with this pretty much finished Sibelius score, which I orchestrated and wrote from these chords here. And the first decision that I made was, what instruments do I want to have in this orchestra? So we have a slightly different orchestra on the go here, particularly in the winds. 2 flutes, totally standard. Alto flute and bass flute. I wanted this darker, more somber sort of sound, basically there for colour. Then we've got 2 clarinets, a bass clarinet, all pretty standard, and then contrabass clarinet, which is my favourite instrument of all time. It's an unbelievably colourful, dark, somber, deep instrument, very expensive to hire, only a couple in the UK, but a sound that I wanted to use in this score because it matches the sort of the style of the piece that I'm writing. 2 bassoons, contrabassoon, absolutely fine. 4 horns, 2 trombones, bass trombone, tuba, no trumpets and no oboes in the orchestra, because I don't want that harsh kind of sound in this piece. I want it to sound kind of soft and woody and mysterious and dark. No piccolo as well for that reason. So this is the kind of decision that I made first of all about what I wanted the sound of the orchestra to sound like. And we've got harp, some percussion, and I've split the strings in 2 just because it makes it easier for when we do take it into the DAW. It means that I can use legato patches more easily, for example, rather than having to split them later on. So in this opening here, we've got the string chords, which I spoke about before, and violins are playing this col legno idea, which is the wood of the bow hitting the strings. And I'm doing this this technique here where they're all playing at different rhythms to create a kind of a big, busy texture and a messy sort of texture. So it's an effect of a lot of col legno coming at you. That's the idea here, and they're just being used to kind of enunciate the changes of chords. So we have 3 versions of chord 1 here, and then this one here is chord 2, which you've got here. So I'm kind of spacing it out a little bit. I want to establish the idea of C minor being the home key. The main melody is in the harp, and what I'm doing here is I'm orchestrating it and giving it some colour with the flutes. And they're dovetailing here, so they each have space to breathe, which is obviously an important thing for flutes. And then the clarinet is adding a little bit of colour to it as well. So this is what it sounds like when Note Performer plays it, this kind of sketching sound. So a pretty good rendition. It's no Spitfire, but Note Performer is pretty good in Sibelius for giving me an idea of kind of the colour and the sound of this piece. Moving on to the next page, much of the same idea, just kind of enjoying that kind of sound world, that mysterious sound world of the chords kind of changing quite regularly, and the harp's idea just kind of expanding a little bit. And then here in the low winds, we have this kind of low rumble. Now this is why I orchestrate in Sibelius and write in Sibelius, because this sort of gesture here, this sound would be really difficult to achieve in Logic. It'd be really hard to write this, I think. That low rumble. It would take forever to put it in, and here I can put it in extremely quickly in Sibelius, and I think it just makes it a bit easier. So on this page, the texture is beginning to kind of build up a little bit at this part here. The horns are starting to state the chords that are in the strings. The violins are now pizzicatoing, and they're adding an octave above what the harp is doing. The flutes are still doing the same thing, but now playing a higher octave as well. The clarinet's still doing the same role. So it's kind of the same, but a bit busier. So from figure 8, I start adding these low woodwinds, which add kind of a sense of movement and punctuation, forward movement to the texture, to the piece here, which then climaxes at this moment here with a big run up from the flutes, these kind of screams in the flutes here, and the first time I'm using tremolo as well to add that sort of busy sound in the strings. So this first section essentially states these chords here. And then from section B, I decided just to make things a bit quicker. We've got the same theme in the harp, and it's now being weirdly doubled in the viola as well. So the viola is now kind of taking on the main theme. We've got an extension on the original chords here, and these rumbles and kind of attacks going on in the woodwinds. So this first couple of bars of this section sounds like this. So again, this is giving me a very good impression of what this will sound like. Still having to use quite a lot of my imagination about what this is really going to sound like, because of course the collegno that the strings are playing here sounds very polite and unmessy, and I know that it will sound a lot kind of rougher, and that's the sound that I want here. On this page, the texture builds up, and then we have the introduction of this melody here, which is the same melody that the harp was playing in the opening. Of course, it's the Desiree theme, fine, whatever, it's been done before. Can't sue me because it's out of copyright now, which is fine. And then we have a counter melody in the horns as well. And the thing which kind of is the identifying feature of this theme is the 4 dotted quaver idea. That's what I use as kind of the hook to link it together. So this is what this sounds like. And then, of course, I've got to mention we've got these low notes, almost kind of drones being added in the bassoons, the low horns, the bass trombone and the tuba. And then we have this build up here. The melody arrives at this moment here where the strings play this really frenetic scale. Now, Sibelius plays that back absolutely perfectly and politely, and I know that when a full string section play that, it'll sound rough and untogether and much bigger than just that polite sound that Sibelius plays back, and that's the sound that I want to go for there. That's me kind of, my imagination is telling me what that sound will be there, rather than what the playback is giving. And then we have the woodwinds doing kind of highlighting the same sort of shape. And again, adding to that kind of rough energy. And then they have this cacophony of kind of screams, which go against the big brass and lower woodwind chords. And then this section ends with 3 statements from, or proclamations or declamations from the timpani, the cellos and the basses. And then this horn here is basically the tinnitus after that. And now I decided to just do a very simple kind of recap, kind of round the piece off. And what I'm doing here is in the clarinets and the bassoons, I have this descending shape. It feels like the whole piece is sort of being dragged down the way everything is descending into a hell or a grave, or it just feels like everything is just being pulled down the way to finish off this piece. And the chords that I'm using here are the first two chords that we heard in the start of the piece. Just to kind of, I always like to refer back to the start of a piece. It's a very good thing to do structurally, just to kind of link everything together to kind of feel like the piece is a cohesive whole. So that's what I do very often in my music. And again, in this recap, I'm repeating the same orchestration pretty much. So the harp is playing the same theme, the flutes and the clarinets and the alto flutes are operating in the same way. We've just added this descending idea and some high harmonics from the strings, but otherwise it's the same texture as what came before. So I hope that was an interesting, very brief insight into this piece. If you have any questions or comments, please do let me know. I hope you found this interesting. Do go listen to the complete Logic version. If you want me to do a breakdown of how I kind of program that, I can do that, but it's very technical and really rather boring, and I don't want anyone to kind of endure that. The music that you hear in the YouTube video is essentially exactly the same as what the Sibelius score is. I didn't change anything, I added a little bit of percussion, but otherwise everything that you see in this score here is what is heard in the Logic file. So thanks so much for coming along, and have a happy Halloween, and see you next time.